because now I was drinking hourly, daily. The last 2 years that I was out, I didn't take a sober breath. It was 24 hours a day.
You and I, and Tyler, in writing these seasons, knew all from the beginning that Mary Magdalene was going to be a key figure in the story. Episode 1 was focused primarily on Mary Magdalene, but at the end of episode 1, she's healed, she's redeemed. So now that she's healed and redeemed, how do we keep her interesting? She can't just be, episode 2 Mary the whole season. If I remember correctly, you might remember better, but it was relatively early on that we knew in season 2 she was going to have a relapse.
Yes. Season 2 seemed like the most sensible landing space for it, right? In our effort to make this a multi-lane highway of people's relationships with Jesus, we knew that where she was coming from and what was ahead, what challenges the road ahead would present to her, we're going to land her in some spots where she would be tempted, where she would be facing traumas that she's seen in her past.
When you were first reading the scripts for season 1, I know that you had a very strong emotional reaction, especially to episode 1, because it's Mary's story. That scene in episode 1 at the end is probably the most talked about scene, at least in the top 3 most talked about scenes in the whole show. Do you get that too? I mean, do people reach out to you and say thank you for that? And for the performance?
Ever since it came out, the response to it has been, people have shared their own stories, and I'm still getting beautiful responses from that now. And I think even what's going on in season 2 is rooted in that.
Right.
People's responses and reactions to what's going on for Mary now is because they had such a personal connection with her in season 1.
So when you read the scripts for season 2 and you saw what was happening, were you, oh grief, I have to go back to that place? Or was it like, this is kind of exciting.
As much as like the end of season 1 was fun, I also, I'm an actor and I want a challenge, I want to try something new or different, something I haven't done before. And so when I got the scripts, I was really excited that this isn't the same thing as episode 1 of season 1. This is part 2 of it. It's a relapse. That's a whole other mentality and psychology to it. And the dialogue wasn't long or anything. The scenes weren't super long, but the emotions were potent, And as I was reading it, it was so cleverly written of like, trigger here, okay, trying to process that. Another trigger here, okay, I'm about to break, and then major trigger. I could understand how she could walk away, and I know that there has been some response of, no, don't leave, don't go, it's dangerous out there. But I understood, I had an understanding of why she didn't feel like she belonged, why she felt that she wasn't worthy to be in the group, and I don't belong here, so I need to go back to where I came from. But after that level of trauma of a man calling you by this old name and trying to attack you, she shifts into not her right mind.
Right. And so she runs back to the thing that had given her comfort in the past, which is alcohol and which
self-medicating.
Self-medicating.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this before. This is not a secret that you experienced significant alcoholism in your life. You've been now a little over 10 years sober, correct?
Yeah, almost 11.
Yeah.
Yay.
But talk about this storyline, because this was probably your most personal, because you at least understood it more than Tyler and I do.
That's
in terms of what relapse looks like, what self-medication looks like. I have different vices myself, but this isn't one of them. This was your storyline.
Yeah. Like Liz said, there's a lot that goes into recovering such a drastic change. Like at the atomic level, you are transformed. And for me, that came from a brutal bottom, a bottom that the floor kept falling out, and I would hit a new bottom. And when I was finally at that point where I asked God for help, I was ready for it. And it took that moment to open me up entirely to how it could change and how God could change me from the inside out. And so it was piece by piece. And all along the way, you have the opportunity to self-reflect. And that journey is fraught with ups and downs and long-term disappointments, things you're cutting off for the future. At first, you just can't imagine a world without the only thing that works for you. In this case, for me, it was booze. But for Mary, who was somebody who was fraught with all sorts of vices and all sorts of a variety of traumas that I wasn't availed of. It's crazy what can trigger or bring back the need for the thing that works and works now. When we were thinking about the storyline in particular, we thought of all the moments that Mary, first century Mary, might encounter that could bring you right back to that spot. So you picked up in the script on the first trigger, the second trigger. And I think I told you on the day that, like, when you relapse, when people relapse, people that I've been in meetings with for maybe 10 years or that I've had fellowship with, they disappear quick. It's not, you don't know what's happening.
Because they don't want the accountability, right? I mean, you know that if you're with anyone, they're going to prevent you from doing what your body is so desperately wanting.
Absolutely. And so Mary's a character with the solution right there in front of her. But when that arc happens, or when you make that turn, the last thing you want in the world you want is the solution. You want your solution, you want it now, you don't want the accountability. And so I think on the day, my thing was, Mary's already out. She just hasn't drank yet.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's that moment that you experienced at the beginning of episode 5, when you're triggered by seeing this Roman soldier, and you fail in your attempt to best it. You don't rely on the tools that you've been given, the Bible verse that you have in your hand, and that's the shame spiral. What I've experienced in my own struggles in my life, not with alcoholism, but with others, where when you mess up and you don't use the obvious tools you've been given, you're like, well, I might as well not even try. I mean, and you start to feel bad about it, and that's what you're experiencing in the scene with Rama in episode 5, where you're saying, I can't believe it. I had my verses, I just crumpled them up, I didn't even use them, and so you're already spiraling.
And then it's funny too, a scene right before that, where I'm teaching her something and she asks me a question. I can't remember the answer.
Right.
My reaction to that is so much worse than the actual problem of, like, I can't remember the rule, the grammar rule.
Right.
It is, I am a complete failure. I forgot the prayer at the beginning, hours before, and now I can't even remember this simple thing. There's something so wrong with me. I can't believe I can even try to pretend to teach you something. Like, it is a spiral. It is a shame spiral, and then everything becomes so much worse than what it actually is. But then, of course, when the demoniac shows up,
Well, then
it's
you try
actually
again.
really bad.
Well, yeah, and you try again,
Yeah.
and you're actually doing pretty well. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to stand up, I'm going to be strong, and that doesn't work either. Yeah. And then it's like, yep, done
Too
for.
much.
I knew it. I knew this was too much for me.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that happened to you in your life, where you fully surrendered, is what happens here in episode 6, which hadn't necessarily happened before. Jesus had saved you.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
you'd been following Jesus around.
Yeah.
He's the best accountability. Things were pretty secure. You hadn't encountered a Roman when you were alone. You hadn't been tempted much. It was pretty smooth sailing. And so that's why, I think for some people who saw this and thought it felt kind of out of the blue, isn't that kind of how it works? That it does come out of the blue in many ways?
Absolutely.
The instantaneousness of it is and I know before your moment 10 years ago, you'd had previous moments
I had
rehab and
8 years of abstinence.
yeah.
And then I had a series of things happen. I talked a little bit about that with some career issues, some relationship issues. Had the moment where I just said, just gonna have a beer. And it was like 8 years had never passed. It was as if I had been a progressively worse drinker from exactly where I picked off, because now I was drinking hourly, daily, and then in short order. I mean, the last 2 years that I was out, I didn't take a sober breath. It was 24 hours a day. I would wake up long enough to shake over to a bottle, dry heave a few until I could keep one down, and then that's how I lived for two full years. And it was quick, and it was complete powerlessness. But I had no accountability system then either, And so that's why I say I wasn't sober. I was abstaining for that time. And this time I surrendered, I got sober. And you realize that your dilemma all along is powerlessness. And so when you've got power nearby, when you've got a source of power, and you can access it. That's also something really important that happens in 206, is that you leave. You leave the place.
Yeah, that was a moment that I was excited to read. There's a moment while we were filming too of like being surrounded by all these gamblers, and it's a rough scene. And
these men who don't give a rip about you.
and are actually trying to cheat me out of my money and are kind of gaslighting me about the rules of gambling and mansplaining. I think there's a lot going on that was actually triggering for me in that moment.
And I remember you were initially struggling a little bit to find the heart of the scene.
I
and
was.
the emotion of the scene. Do you remember what we talked about that kind of unlocked it for you?
Yeah, you reminding me of, as I'm looking around at these strangers, their faces, that I should be surrounded by my brothers, and these should be the people that protect me and love me. And
Look around, see all these men. I think it can really register that you're in a room by yourself with these guys instead of the disciples. And that should be Simon, that should be Matthew, that should be, you know what I mean? Take your time.
that was the key to unlock it. And suddenly I missed my friends. and I think it was a reminder of I do belong with them. And then, of course, leaving and being found by two of them.
Who had gone to great lengths, these two guys who don't like each other.
At all.
Right. And they're pursuing you because Jesus told them to. But and as we see, you didn't know this, but in episode 5, we actually see Simon goes to Jesus and is like, do you want me to go? I need to go find Mary.
Yeah.
And Jesus wants them to participate in this process. It's not just always him coming to the rescue. He wants us to participate in it as well. And of course, he's the ultimate rescuer, but he wants his disciples to start living out what he's doing as well. But then also the Isaiah 43 verse of, the words. What do we say when we are scared? We say the words. I've called you by name, you are mine.
I think remembering a phrase like that is this reminder of being loved, and that changes everything,
Because there are negative triggers and then there are positive triggers, right? There are things that make you go, like, I'm pursuing myself, I'm pursuing my own desires, my own addictions, and then, sometimes it's a picture of your spouse or a picture of your family or your kid, and you go, what am I doing?
Yes.
And you have that line that's so beautiful, he fixed me once, but I broke again. And I was on the set just like, I think
everyone can relate to that.
Oh yeah,
too.
of course. And it's like, I broke again, so now he can't fix me twice. Like he wouldn't do that. And Simon even says, like, Jesus wants us to bring you back. So talk about that scene, because I know that you said that was for some reason you loved that moment.
I showed up and just wasn't sure if I could deliver, Right. And then all I needed apparently was the sweet faces of Paris and Shahar, and the sincerity of the words they were speaking. It was real. It felt real again, of kindness and gentleness and friendship, and that type of real love, that every time they would say these things, I needed to be where I needed to be, instead of trying to force anything. It was just responding and reacting to the beautiful words written, but then also the beautiful performances of my castmates.
Great scene partners.
They're so present and there, and I stopped thinking about, acting it and just let it happen.
Well, and Matthew says that the shift in the scene is when he says, I'm not a good person. And he basically is identifying with you going, and this is the whole point of the show. This is the whole point of the Gospels, in my opinion, but which is that we're all equally in need of salvation. And we all have our vices and sins and struggles and desperations. And he says, you're saying, he fixed me once and I broke again. I'm too much. I'm unworthy. And he's just like, yeah, remember me? I'm not great either. And you're like, no. And he's like, no. I need to tell you this. And that's that moment of vulnerability and authenticity that again, I haven't been in recovery, but isn't that one of the bigger things is you have to be honest. You have to just embrace the crap.
Rigorously, painfully, ruthlessly honest.
So then the scene with Jesus, where you're like, I'm not sure I can face him yet.
It's funny because it paralleled, of course, the end of episode 1 of season 1, which I didn't say much, and what he said was scripture, so it wasn't like a dialogue. It wasn't us chatting back and forth. So in this one, it was having to face someone that you've hurt you know, in a variety of ways. It was an apology that she doesn't want to quite get to.
Right.
And she starts with, I'm so ashamed,
Right.
I'm embarrassed, I didn't even come back on my own. Like, it's all these sort of excuses of still feeling maybe not quite worthy.
Yeah. The big difference in the end of that scene that I think happened, or I know it happened spontaneously, was at the end of season 1, episode 1, Jesus reaches for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you're like, ugh. In this scene, you spontaneously reached for him before it was scripted to do so. He was going to kind of step towards you, and you just like went,
Clung.
yeah, you just clung, which I think is a great picture of the difference between that first redemption and the second one, which is the first one was like, I can't take it. The second one was, I need it.
Yeah.
I need it. And this second one is more like your surrender the second time than it was the first time, you know.
Great
This
choice.
one will stick.
Well,
a
it's
little
also
longer.
that bond when you've done something to hurt someone and they actually forgive you. You're more indebted to them. You love them more. There's just like another layer of gratitude, and I think that's what just kind of came out.
Right. But yeah, it was beautiful after episode 5 to get so many notes from people saying, I went through this myself. Thank you for showing that even after you are saved, you still can struggle. Because I felt shame about that. And now that we've seen in episode 6 where that ends, I know it's gratifying for us as the ones who wrote it to go, okay, it's working. People are invested. I hope it's also gratifying for you to hear from people
Oh,
who
absolutely.
are saying, this is changing my life. This is, and your performance reminds me of what I went through.
It has meant a lot to get these responses. And if these sort of challenging storylines affect people in this way, like, I think this is sort of a lesson in trust in the show of like, we're gonna take care of you though. You know what I mean? Like, it's gonna hurt sometimes, and it is going to hurt in the future seasons. This is a painful story, but it is the ultimate story of redemption and of hope. And so I feel like this is a nice sort of like teaser of that, taste of that, of like, this is how this belief system operates.
And this is how life is.
If he can help me, he can help them. Yeah.